Welcome back to College Football Addiction. By now, you have certainly seen the Dellenger report. You've probably watched the Pate video. Maybe you've watched people like Rufino and Joe or Uncle Lou or just whomever talk about SEC Big Ten meetings upcoming and the reports that we're getting out of that, the leaked reports, what the commissioners of those conferences have told Ross to start to leak out. And that is that the SEC may be changing their scheduling. We may be adding auto bids to an expanded playoff. And we are reimagining the way that conference championships may look. Well, listen, I think everybody has a hot take on YouTube, and I am certainly guilty of that at times and certainly even own up to that at times. I think there are some real issues with this. I think there are a couple of really good things that come out of this. Not everything is all good or all bad. I think there's probably more bad beneath the surface on this than good, but I do think there's probably good and bad baked into this. At first, though, is this ruining college football? I thought Uncle Lou had probably the best point about this. No one singular thing is ruining college football, but the amount of change that we've had, and I'll link his video because I thought it was really good. I'm sure a lot of you guys watch his channel too. The amount of change that we've had in really just the last 10 years, from going to the 14 playoff until now, NIL portal, expanding the playoff once we got to it, the auto bids, the SEC and Big Ten kind of running everything. That is, I wouldn't say it's ruining the sport. The viewership is up higher than it's ever been, but it's just changing the sport. And is that good? Is that bad? I don't know, man. It doesn't feel like college football has always felt. But some of the things to come out of this. A 9-game SEC schedule. I really propose that that's probably a good thing. I think we're going to get more of those SEC rivalries that we're missing out on right now due to what happened with adding Texas and Oklahoma. Some of those all-time classic rivalries just not there because of having to add a couple of other teams and keeping it at 8 games. People argued about this. I always thought the SEC would end up going to 9 games. I think that's a good thing. Something that I don't love as much is the auto bids into the playoff. I don't think that is necessary at this point. I understand that this 1 year, and I understand that you guys, well, TJ, you're just an SEC hater. You're just jealous because Florida State's not. Listen, I think we've tried to be pretty unbiased on this. But I do think that the SEC didn't get their way 1 year, right? They got left out due to let's be honest, a technicality. Like Clemson really shouldn't have been in the playoffs, but because Miami couldn't take care of their business and then SMU couldn't take care of their business in the ACC championship game, Clemson sneaks in. And so for 1 year, the SEC doesn't get their way, even though, in 2023, they were benefited, right? In 2020, before that, they've always gotten the benefit of the doubt. 1 year, they don't get their way. Alabama gets left out and they go into meltdown mode. And I just don't know that 4 auto bids for the Big Ten and the SEC is really all that necessary. Just go back and look at the final playoff rankings of the top 14 or 16 teams. Look at it over the last 10 years and tell me how many times there weren't 4 SEC teams in the top 14 or 16. Come on. There always are, right? Most of the time, there's 2 in the top 4, but a lot of time, every time, there are 4 SEC teams in the top 16. Look at the Big Ten. Add in Oregon to that and find out how many times there are not 4 Big Ten teams in the top 16. Think about it. Ohio State's always there. Penn State's always there. The last 10 years, Oregon has been there more years than they haven't. Michigan is there usually. And then you have the other teams sneaking up into there too. Illinois, Indiana, whatever, the teams that are hot right now. And so is it necessary to stack a deck that doesn't need to be stacked? Do you need to give more preferential treatment to a situation that, I don't know, do they really need it? And it sounds great, right? Like I just told you, well, most of the time they're going to get 4 in anyway. But what about the years where maybe they don't deserve it? Maybe we have a situation like we just had. Maybe an 8-4 SEC team gets in over a 10-2 ACC team because the ACC has a year where Miami, SMU, and Clemson, or Miami, Florida State, and Clemson, or Miami, Louisville, and Clemson, whoever, all kind of have good years. And because somebody finished 4th in another conference and has a couple more losses, they have an auto bid to get into it. I don't really know that that's a great situation for college football. Just put in the the best 12 teams, right? Put in the teams that you think, or 14 or 16, whatever. I don't know. I don't love the auto bid thing. I don't love the way that that's going. But it is here. It is going to happen. I just don't know that it's a positive. Does it ruin college football? No, I'm not going to go that far. I don't think it's the best thing for the sport. More games coming that don't matter. I've been on this horse pretty, religiously in thinking that there were a lot of games in college football this year that didn't matter. And some people will counteract that and say, yeah, but there were more games that did matter. Think about Florida and Ole Miss. That game years ago wouldn't have mattered. And it mattered this year because Ole Miss was fighting for a playoff spot. And that's fine, right? Those games mattered for the playoff, but I still would argue they didn't matter for the national championship. There were games this year that didn't matter for the national championship. We actually did a video on this, how, yes, both sides are right. More games mattered and less games mattered. More games mattered for the playoff. Less games mattered for the national championship. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, Ole Miss and Florida mattered for the playoff. Alabama and Oklahoma mattered for the playoff. Miami and Syracuse mattered for the playoff. But none of those games mattered for the national championship. But you know what else didn't matter for the national championship? Ohio State losing to Michigan as a 3-score favorite at home. You know what else didn't matter? Notre Dame losing to Northern Illinois. You know what else didn't matter? The Big Ten championship. You know what else didn't matter? The SEC championship. Both those teams got in. The losers got more favorable draws. None of that mattered. And so I don't like the idea that we're going to get a Big Ten and SEC scheduling agreement that the games are going to be fun. We're all going to watch them. We're all going to enjoy them. But they don't really matter, because when you look at what it's going to take to make the playoffs, it's to finish top 4 in your conference. It's going to be the top 4 conference teams in the Big Ten and the SEC. So what you do out of conference essentially doesn't matter, except for maybe one auto bid, one team outside of the, or one at-large bid, I'm sorry. So we're going to have less meaningful football because of this. You talk about the season. We have speculated on this, and we spoke with Drake C. Toll of Locked On Big 12. We've spoken with other people about this. The season being too long, and how the idea, I thought Pate had a good point about this, the idea of scarcity, the idea of more football isn't always better. The season's about to get even longer, and this is going to go on even further. And you remember how lackluster the hype around the national championship felt this year? With two massive brands, with the Big Ten crown jewel of Ohio State, and then college football's crown jewel of Notre Dame. It was a national championship game that I felt like had less hype than I can remember. Maybe the TCU UGA game was less hyped, but even that one, you were kind of thinking, man, can TCU pull off another upset after beating Michigan? Can they do it again? This one, I don't know. It was weird. And I think it's because it happened on MLK Day. Today's President's Day when I'm recording this. But is that really good? Is the season getting even longer a good thing? We've talked about the NFLization of college football. And listen, fans don't want that. But the powers at ESPN and Fox, they do. They do want that. They do want this sport to turn into the NFL. They absolutely want it. They want it to just be the Big Ten controlling half the country and the SEC controlling the other half. That's what they want. There's no doubt about it. How do I know that? The NFL is the most successful sports league in the world. It's not close. There's a reason they're trying to go play games in Germany and Mexico and Europe and England, all over the place. Goodell has talked about having a franchise international. They love this idea of turning college football into the NFL and being NFL light. Obviously, fans don't love it. Fans love what makes college football unique and its own kind of crown jewel of the Southeast. But we're moving closer to that with this. I think it's a little bit funny how the Big Ten and the SEC control the whole thing. Like, how dumb are the other conference commissioners to not stand up to this at all? And not stand up and say, like, no, we should have some input. The Big Ten and the SEC decide what happens from here on out. So not only can they stack the deck for themselves, if this doesn't go well for them in 2026 and beyond, they will just change it. And there's nothing anyone else can do to stop it. They'll control the payouts. They'll control the money. They'll control the seating. They'll control the buys. They'll control everything. And the other conference commissioners have basically just signed their rights away. Hey, do what you want. You look at that and you wonder, well, yeah, if you were Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, Miami, why wouldn't you want to get the heck out of a conference that has essentially said, yeah, we're okay being second rate. We're going to make less money per team. We're going to get less teams in. The gap between those big two or the power two continues to grow wider. Why wouldn't you want to get out? Speaking on that, we haven't done a lot of live stuff on this channel, and we do have a live show coming up on Wednesday at noon Eastern. So if you're watching this, if you're enjoying this, make sure you're subscribed. It's not just going to be me on here ranting. I've got a couple other guests. We won't announce them just yet. It'll be a surprise Wednesday at noon live Eastern time. Come hang out with us talking about the Power 2. There's a little hint on what we'll be chatting on. The biggest pro, though, of all this, like I've been pretty negative, right? Been negative about all this. I don't like it. I don't like this. I don't like that. Whatever. Here's the best part. We might get rid of the committee. Are we going to get rid of the college football playoff committee? These idiots in suits in Dallas or wherever the heck they meet, can we make them less relevant? Because to me, that's the biggest pro out of all of this. Knowing what we have and just moving on. Now at 16, I guess they'll be somewhat relevant, but at 14 teams, I don't think they're relevant at all. You obviously have your 4 SEC, 4 Big 10, and 4 from the ACC and Big 12, 2 each. So there's 12 teams right there. You're going to have one group of 5. That takes you to 13. And then you have either one at-large team or Notre Dame. If Notre Dame's in there in the top 14, they're in. And so that leaves you with nothing for the committee to decide. The seeding, I guess, if the SEC and Big 10 don't decide the seeding ahead of time too. So in a 14-team playoff, the committee is virtually irrelevant if Notre Dame takes care of business. What about with a 16-team playoff? Well, you've got the 4 SEC, 4 Big 10, 4 ACC, and Big 12, so that takes you to 12. You got 4 left. One group of 5 means there's 3 left, so either 3 at-larges or 2 at-large in Notre Dame. So in a 16-team playoff, which is what I suspect they'll do just to keep the playoff committee being somewhat relevant because we just can't ever have nice things in this sport anymore, I do think that they'll go 16 just for that simple fact. That just my guess. I don't have any inside info. Ask Ross if you want to know the answer to that one. But I do think that getting rid of the playoff committee, which they won't do, but they will very much reduce their relevance, that's a huge win out of this. Because those people, let's just be honest, suck. And they're one of the worst parts of this sport. People in a room who don't care about college football like you and I do, getting to decide what happens is usually terrible. I actually think they got it right this year. I think putting SMU in over Bama was the right call. Some people disagree with that. That's fine. I actually think they got it right. I still don't have any love lost for the committee. So getting rid of them, I think a massive win. 1 year, though, of the SEC not getting their way, this is what we are going to face now. Another monumental change. And like Uncle Lou said, again, I'll link his video. I thought it was really, really good. We've had so much change, and we're not anywhere close to done. Like, we'll get to 14 or 16, and in 2030, 2031, they'll redo this thing again. And maybe before then, if the Big Ten and the SEC aren't super happy with how it's going, but we're going to get more change very soon. It will continue to change until they do squeeze everything that was special about college football, until they squeeze it all out of the sport. Listen, I've ranted. I've given you my opinion. It's not all doom and gloom. We're still going to watch all the games. We're still going to talk about all the games. Listen, December and January were great months for the channel because we talked about a lot of playoff games. It was actually great for the channel. I loved it from hey, I'm working in this space now. I didn't necessarily love it being a fan as much as I thought I would, right? But at this point, me or you yelling into a microphone or commenting on YouTube isn't going to change too much. Let me know what you think down below. Right, wrong, indifferent, doesn't matter. I appreciate interacting with you guys. I appreciate chatting with you guys. Let's talk about it down below. Again, Wednesday at noon. Make sure you're tuned in to our very first live show. I've got a couple of guests that we'll be on with live every Wednesday at noon. Make sure that you are here for that. Appreciate you guys, as always, for tuning in to College Football Addiction.